Welcome into our NFL Roundtable for Week 4. This week, I am joined by two of my Action Network colleagues. Excuse me, Brendan Glasheen, joined by our NFL contributors, Mr. Brandon Anderson. Catch Brandon every Friday morning here on the Action Network podcast for our weekly NFL Best Bets episodes, as well as Monday mornings for our NFL recaps. And joining him is one of our predictive analyst, one of our predictive analytics contributors at Action. He's a darling of the Action Network Discord server. He's one of our best NASCAR bettors in the world. He's an engine of action. He is the engine or an engine. I mean, pick one. There's very different connotation there, but he is a key cog behind the Action Network luck rankings, NFL luck rankings. He does a million different stuff here. The doctor, Nick Giffen, is joining the NFL Roundtable for the first time this year. Hi, Nick.
Hello. Happy leading into week 4 of NFL season.
Was that the best setup you've ever had in your Action Network career?
It was. I think the only thing you left off was the college basketballness.
All right, Nick, my fault. I forgot one of the 80 million things you do. Fair chirp back, though. We're going to spend the first half of today's show focusing on the luck rankings. First off, let's kick off with the first usual question, and we're going to get to several topics. Nick, I call this like the group therapy session, Tuesday of the NFL season, just to kind of decompress, gather your thoughts, and what is kind of twisting and turning up there in your brain of yours leading into the following week. So I'll go to you first. Biggest takeaway from NFL Week 3?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me is how different it was from weeks 1 and 2. Some people may not realize it. They still think scoring is down, but play calling and QB improvements were the name of the week. Passing success rates were up to 45.3%. That's up from 41 and 43% in weeks 1 and 2. Passing volume was up. There were 1,138 total passing plays that were non-spikes that resulted in either a pass attempt or a sack versus 1053 and 1040 in weeks 1 and 2. So nearly 100 more pass attempts in week 3 than the first 2 weeks average. And if we look at explosive plays, explosive passing was up to 4.7%, which of all plays, not just of pass plays, but of all plays, 4.7% of all plays versus 3.9 and 4.2% in weeks 1 and 2. And explosive passing, explosive rushing, non-explosive passing, and non-explosive rushing were all right in line with 2023 averages for the whole season there in week 3. So maybe we're having a little bit of a return to maybe not so much normalcy, but closer to what we've been seeing in the past.
Brandon, same question to you.
Yeah, I feel like the takeaway is kind of what we thought going in, Brandon. I think it was kitchen sink week. We saw all these 0-2 teams show up and fight for their lives. We ranked, Brandon, on our show on Friday, we ranked the 9 0-2 teams in order of how well they fit the kitchen sink trends. The top 5 we ranked were the Rams, Ravens, Giants, Colts, Panthers. They all covered. They all won outright. 6.5 point dog, 6.5, 7.5 for 3 of those teams. Sunday especially was a very kitchen sinky week or kitchen sinky day. And just in general, that's been the story of the season, I think, still, is just the underdogs continue to win. And to me, the takeaway then is don't get too overconfident, right? The Steelers are 3-0. The Vikings are 3-0. The Bengals are 0-3. The Jaguars are 0-3. Like, nobody thought this is what was going to happen. You got to kind of see what's happening, hold lightly to things, don't get too overconfident in your reads, and especially play the number, not necessarily just the team or the matchup. Sometimes when books are overreacting or bettors are overreacting or both, we got to just kind of close your eyes and take the points. I even said on the show that the Rams were the best kitchen sink spot. They're definitely the spot to take, but I can't do it. I couldn't do it. And then here they are, winners of their game. So sometimes you just got to play the number in the spot and let the rest sort itself out.
I think Nick raises a good point with his data to back it up, but also just eyeball test. It's a proof that the no preseason, we've been beating this into the drum, but no preseason and young quarterbacks. Like I think Nick Daniels was fantastic last night, of course. Just they're making strides. And I think this is what the league wanted us to sign up for by adding another game eventually down the road, adding the 17th game a few years ago, 18 coming. We're just going to have to accept that, these first few weeks are going to be turbulent and maybe piss poor as far as like offense is concerned, but better, good signs in week 3, as Nick mentioned. So for like the 500th million time that I've talked to Nick Giffen, I want him to educate the audience on the NFL luck rankings. And it's a big umbrella of a question here, but like your biggest takeaway as it pertains to the NFL luck rankings, Nick Giffen.
Yeah, something that I thought was very interesting is what powers our luck rankings is something called expected scores. So that's basically, if they replayed this game between these two teams a million times over and put them in the same situations, what should the score have been based off the underlying stats and data from that matchup? Well, our expected scores have always trended perfectly with actual scores. If you plot a graph, you get a perfect line that fits right next to the line y equals x. This year, our expected scores, you have to just shift straight downward from actual scores. I should say actual scores are much lower than our expected scores. So our expected scores have been overshooting every game. And I think it's because of the weird changes in week 1 and 2. Week 3 was a lot better, though. So I'm not totally there on I need to update the expected scores formula. We'll see what happens. But I do have a contingent expected scores formula ready in case there's been some league-wide shifts. And that's the thing. The NFL is always changing. I can't use luck rankings data from pre-2018 because the league was so different 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago than it was the past few years. And if the league is starting to change again, then we're going to have to keep up with that in the expected score formula. And that's a great thing about having the luck rankings is we'll be able to catch up just as fast, if not faster, than maybe the other sports bettors or the books, because we're always staying on top of these trends of how expected scores and actual scores. But one thing that's not going to change is luck, right? If you should have scored more and you didn't, or if you should have scored less, those things will still tend to play out over time. So I think, we'll be right on the ball there. So even if overall scores have gone up or down, the luck factor will still remain.
Not stubborn, which I appreciate about people like you that appreciate math. But quickly, to respond to what you said, what would prompt you to make a change? Like what would it take?
Just sustained differences between actual and expected scores. I think if it's sustained and we see reasons for it being sustained, things like we've talked about with the too high safety trends, more rushing, fewer overall plays, if those things are sustained and they affect things like explosive play rates and success rates are no longer indicative of predicted performance or less predictive of future performance, simply because success rate is less meaningful because the successes are smaller, then I think that it would just prompt a change. But it has to be sustained and there has to be reasons for it.
So using the luck rankings, and I want Brandon to chime in on this after you give out these. I think this first one won't surprise many, I think, based on some of the screenshots I saw online last night that are annoying people. They're getting a lot of breaks like the Patriots did in their dynasty run. Which teams, based on the luck rankings, are lucky? Which teams are unlucky? And can you explain about why that is the case for each of those teams?
Yeah, so we'll start right at the top. Chiefs enter week 4 as the luckiest team. They were the luckiest team after week 3, or I should say after week 2, entering week 3 as well. And we know
for the record, Nick is not just going back to likely and the non-PI call. There's a lot that goes into this. He's not just whining about calls, right?
Sure,
Nick?
yeah. Well, it has nothing to do with calls. It just has to do with the fact that based off the expected scores of these games, they should have lost week 1 versus the Ravens. We had, I think the Ravens about 1.5 points better in our expected scores from the data. We had Cincinnati by about 1 point over the Chiefs, and they won both of those games. So going 2-0 when realistically you should be 50-50 means you're at 50% luck. If you're a 100% winner versus 50% should be winning, our luck rankings use record versus expected record, right? And so, and there's another way we can look at luck rankings, which is scoring versus actual scoring versus expected scoring. That is a different luck percentage that I also keep in the background. I've actually found that record has been more indicative of successful betting with the luck rankings. Interesting enough. And then week 3 against Atlanta, they played a close game. It was a 1-score game. They should have won. They should have won by about as much as they did. But that just means, again, they're still half a win above expectation, something like that. Well, I shouldn't say half a win, more than that. They're 3-0, and they should have won, around 1.5 of these games, a little more than 1.5 of these games, because they've all essentially been coin flips.
And they've won 3, right?
Yeah.
They're 3-0. Second unluckiest team is who? Unlucky.
Yeah. So the Bengals on the flip side, who the Chiefs, of course, played in week 2, are the second most unlucky. They dropped into our bottom 3 this week after that loss to the Washington Commanders, which they should have lost by our expected score, but only by 1 point, not by 5. But a lot of it also has to do with the loss versus the Chiefs, which was unlucky, as we talked about. And in week 1, they lost to the Patriots in a game they definitely got unlucky in. Our expected score still had the Patriots winning, but by a very close margin instead of the 6-point margin that the Patriots won.
Okay, and then the last one.
Oh, man.
Will Levis, I think, has contributed to some of this as far as, yeah.
Yeah, my note in here is, holy hell, stop giving up defensive and special team scores, because the Titans have given up 3 of those now. 1 on a blocked punt that turned into a touchdown, and 2 Will Levis turnovers into scores. Per Pro Football Focus, Will Levis has only had 3 turnover-worthy plays this year. 2 of them have been touchdowns for the opposing team, right? So that's just not sustainable. That's if you throw 20 turnover-worthy plays in a season, maybe 2 or 3 of them tend to be pick sixes. He's already had 2 or 3 of them in the first couple weeks here. So certainly just some bad turnover luck. He is going to be a guy that will be on the higher turnover side of things, and that's all accounted for in the underlying data. But just the fact that they've been returned for scores is, and then the blocked punt as well has just been really unlucky.
Brandon, I think this kind of reflects back to what you said off the top about long year, kitchen sink week. Now you got to keep it in perspective. When you using Nick as kind of a jumping off point with the luck rankings, how does that as a bettor now keep you grounded?
Yeah, I think for me, what's interesting is thinking about playing week to week versus playing futures. So we know I'm like the big futures guy. And so with the Chiefs, you've got to acknowledge Chiefs and Bengals, both sides of the equation here, where, okay, I probably shouldn't be thinking about the Chiefs as this like high flying 3-0, 2-time Super Bowl champion juggernaut right now. That's not how they're playing. However, they are in fact 3-0. It's a binary sport. You either win or you lose. I mean, you get like a tie once a season, but you pretty much either win or lose. And so I have an article up today as we've got 5 3-0 teams. So my article at Action Network is, okay, which of the 3-0 teams might still not make the postseason? The numbers kind of vary because the postseason is shifting. Effectively, about 1 in 3 3-0 teams tend to still miss the playoffs. It's not going to be the Chiefs. They're 3-0 against the Ravens and the Bengals and the Falcons, which right now doesn't seem great because those teams aren't winning. But when we look back at the end of the season, that's going to be the toughest stretch of the season. They should have lost at least 1 of the games, maybe 2 already. Like, Nick, by your formula, they could be 0-3, right? Like, they are not so far from 0-3 versus 3-0, but they're not. So I need to think about the Chiefs a little less week to week and maybe not think that they're juggernauts blowing teams out. But on a future standpoint, they're 3-0 with the luck in their favor. However they got there, you can be mad if you want, but like Patrick Mahomes' MVP stock has to be up, not because he's playing well, but because we pick quarterbacks from teams that win a lot, and the Chiefs win a lot. And guess what? They still got 2 Broncos games, 2 Raiders games, 2 Chargers games, one of them this week against the corpse of the Chargers, whoever they have left to roll out. So that's a Chiefs side. On the other side with the Bengals, are the Bengals an 0-3 team? Well, no. The Bengals are a much better team than they look right now. They've had terrible fumble luck. They've had terrible kicking luck. Like, everything has gone against them. Also, yes, the Bengals are 0-3 because that's what the standings say. They have lost the games. And historically, last week with the kitchen sink thing, we talked about you got to win in week 3. You can't go to 0-3. Your chances of making the playoffs at 0-3 are like nearly 0 historically. It's barely ever happened. The Bengals are, in fact, 0-3. I have to treat them like they're not a postseason team. Until they actually make the postseason, that's when I have to assume. That doesn't mean I have to bet them week to week. I think they're a much better team than they look week to week. So it's both. And I think too, as you follow picks in the app or see how things come in, you can be on a Bengals side and you can still be fading the Bengals futures both at the same time. So I think for me, that's where the luck rankings come in to say, okay, well, how do I need to think about this team now? But also, what are the actual results that we have for later, and how do they tally up for futures?
Interesting. And yeah, the article, NFL predictions, futures picks, ranking which undefeated teams could miss the playoffs. And he talks about all 5 of them.
Yeah, spoiler alert, I'm not a big fan of the Steelers right now. So the question is really when, not if, we should be fading Pittsburgh. You can take a look at that for more.
Third luckiest team in our luck
Thank
rankings, the Pittsburgh.
You're right.
There we go.
You read my mind.
And to Brandon's point, when we get around week 5, 6, 7, when enough teams have had 5, 6, 7 games, right? Then we can really start strength of schedule adjusting, because to Brandon's point, the Chiefs faced a tough schedule and they'll face an easier schedule. When we get the strength of schedule adjusted expected scores, that's when it really kicks in. And I love starting to bet futures again, rest of season futures. I love that. And that's how we can use the luck rankings for that.
I think this year more memorable than others in terms of also monitoring IR, injured reserve, guys coming off in terms of the injury bug. That's a big thing. I mean, years ago, if a guy went on IR, they're done till like week 8, and that's like, now you can stash guys and basically load manage like the NBA does. All right, we'll keep you out 4 weeks, get you back in there. But that's for down the road. NFL Week 4, Nick Giffen, means we can start using the luck rankings for totals as well. What are we seeing this week? Unders have been hitting at a very high rate, so I think that might be at the top of mind for bettors tuning in. So with that in mind, but you did say the offense was better in week 3, better quarterback play. So how are we meshing that together? And it goes back to expected scoring.
Yeah, this is a messy one. Normally, this is where totals would kick in, and we'd be betting some luck overs or some luck unders, depending on if these teams should have been in higher scoring games than they were, or should have been in lower scoring games than they were. Then it would trend towards an under. But with expected scores not matching actual scores, a complete total shift, it makes me a little nervous. So I have both the old version of expected scores and the 2024 version of expected scores in there. And what I think we can do safely is, if I'm using the 2024 version of expected scores, which are lower to match the lower actual scoring, and we're still showing undervalue based off of the luck unders, then we can safely bet the under, I think, right? Because I've already adjusted them down, and it's saying you should still go lower than that, and maybe books haven't caught up enough to the under trends. Then I feel like we can safely bet an under, even if the league returns to previous rates of scoring and sustainableness. We have such a buffer there. We're going under on a kind of artificial under that I've made with the expected scores. So we have a lot of buffer for, if these offenses improve, we can still hit the under.
I think we have 5 totals under 40 this week. Tennessee, Miami, Cleveland, Vegas, Kansas City, Chargers. Wow, that's under 40. Patriots, Niners, Rams, Bears is at 40.5 now. Colts, Steelers, which, Brandon, you've been on top of that one for a while now, going back a few weeks. And then Denver, Jets. Okay, maybe it's more than 5. Maybe it was 6. Okay. All right. Anything to weigh in there, Brandon, as far as totals? Because Brandon Anderson got one of the hottest guys in the company right now. He got his whole season straightened out thanks to betting some unders.
Yeah, the unders definitely have gone well. I was just looking as you were talking, Nick, to see what the total is for that Monday night Titans and Dolphins game. I don't know if we're going to get there on our rundown here, but I have my eye on that one only because I'm wondering who exactly plays quarterback for the Dolphins. And I don't know that this necessarily will carry over, but I think maybe the quarterback will be Tyler Huntley, because Skylar Thompson's not healthy and we're out of options. Tyler Huntley, lest we forget, is a Pro Bowler. Don't forget, Tyler Huntley is a Pro Bowler, which is ridiculous. Tyler Huntley unders are 8-1 all time. They average under 32 points a game combined for the teams. Now, look, those are with the Ravens. I don't get the Ravens defense in this game, but I do get Will Levis and maybe Tyler Huntley if we go that direction. So I do see there's some 37.5s out there. 37 is the last key number we get going down. So I think that under could be interesting. Nick, does that one come up in the luck unders at all right now?
It does. It is the second most luck under right now. I think a lot of it is Will Levis gifting pick sixes to the other teams, scoring that shouldn't have been there, right? The block punt, things like that. So this game actually has, with the newly adjusted expected scores, a luck total of minus 9.6. Typically, we say anything below minus 5 is a luck under. So this is the second most luck under on the already downward adjusted expected scores.
Real quick before we move on from luck, as much as I love the luck conversation, what else besides betting sides and totals can we utilize? Because Nick, you dive into some niche markets, which makes it a lot of fun to follow you in the Action Network app. So what are some other things that folks can use the luck rankings for to capitalize on markets?
Yeah, team totals, of course. If we have luck team totals, which is how much these teams should be scoring above or below expectation based off the matchup they have that week. We can do player props, right? If a team is, the perfect one was Caleb Williams this week. I took over 30.5 passing attempts. He threw over 50 because we had the Indianapolis Colts as the unlucky team versus the Bears. So we had Indy more likely to cover versus the Bears, more likely to lead, meaning passing game script for the Bears. And so you can translate that into Caleb Williams needing to pass more than expectation. So you can use player props for it. Highest and lowest scoring games. We just talked about luck totals, right? Billy Ward, our predictive analytics colleague, weeks 1 and weeks 2 hit the highest scoring game, 7-1 in week 1, 10-1 in week 2. We had a luck signal on the week 2 game specifically. So I was also on that with him. Highest scoring game in week 2 hit at 10-1. So all sorts of things. And I have an overtime model that I like to use. Yeah. And when the underdog team is also the unlucky team, they're more likely to cover, more likely to make it close. Overtime ends up showing more value. So that's always a fun one, like a 15-1, 12-1 type market that I love playing every once in a while when the model shows value.
Okay, real quick before I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, so forgive me. Any luck plays that you want to give here on this show before we move on?
I don't have any other than I like that luck under that Tennessee and Miami that Brandon was talking about for Monday Night Football. Haven't gotten through everything yet, right? Monday Night Football just ended last night. I instantly updated the luck rankings when the data came out. And because I'm on Pacific time, I haven't had a chance to dive in this morning.
No problem. This, again, it's Tuesday morning. And Nick, he's West Coast time. Tuesday afternoon for our cases, myself and Brandon. So all good, no problem. Just want to be sure we have all this luck talk that there's something there. We'll give it out. Again, this is our roundtable episode. It's kind of getting into the weeds from what we just saw and trying to wrap our heads around what is expected this week. Brandon, we did the recap episode on Sunday evening in the wee hours into Monday, and I felt kind of bad because Evan Abrams, our director of research and media, does a great job. We split up all the games, Nick, and I allowed Evan to talk about the Carolina Raiders game, and we were short on time or moving along. I really didn't give Brandon a chance to weigh in on the Island Resort, maybe getting some positive reviews. They looked like the Panthers looked like a real franchise for the first time in forever. Dave Canales with Andy Dalton, who looked awesome, slinging it all over the yard. The team, Carolina, claims that Bryce Young's benching is temporary. It's a temporary timeout. How many games do they need to lose to return to Bryce Young without causing a riot, Brandon?
I mean, I think that the fact that Bryce Young is in trade rumors right now probably speaks for itself. So I think that it's Andy Dalton's team until proven otherwise. He is our only 303 touchdown game of the year. Well, I'm not sure if that's still true after last night. I'm going to guess we had some big performances on Monday night, but Dalton had a big game. Chuba Hubbard had 100 and almost 70 yards combined, 2 scores. Deontay Johnson looked like a receiver again. It's like, oh, hey, look, competent quarterback play. How about that? Panthers Island, 1 game out of the division. After all that, I don't know. The Saints lose, the Falcons lose, and the Buccaneers lose. We're there. A week ago, we bet them at 200-1 to win the division. It's down to 25-1 now. That means we're still going to lose, but we got a lot better chance now. It's only 1 game back. We'll see. I got to be honest. I can't get so excited about Carolina yet. I think this was more about the Raiders, the other team in the game that got absolutely plowed by the Panthers. Antonio Pierce, after 3 weeks, is calling dudes out for business decisions.
Oh,
Antonio
God.
Pierce,
Yeah.
after 3 weeks, is talking about maybe benching their quarterback. What in the world? 3 weeks in, like if you've lost things that badly already, and their run game in particular, Antonio Pierce wants to run football. Like this is what their identity is supposed to be. It's what they brought in Luke Getsy to do. They are under 31% in rushing success rate. That is dead last in the NFL. It's about half of what the Saints are so far. EPA per run, there are 2 teams below negative 0.25 EPA per run. One of them's the Panthers. One of them's the Raiders at negative 0.64 EPA per run. Every time the Raiders run the ball 3 times, which is like a series usually, they lose 2 more points, chancing to win the game. So it's not great. It's not great for the Raiders. And I got to tell you, not great for the Bengals that they are only 4.5-point favorites playing the Panthers this week. The Panthers, as terrible as they've looked, before the season, this was 6.5 on the season look ahead. So not a great look for the Bengals that the line has dropped toward the Panthers despite their terrible start. Although, Nick, Bengals luck rankings, the Bengals are still a lot better than the Panthers. If it's only 4.5 points, I'm going to have to think pretty hard about back in the 0-3 team there.
And
Thanks for
your
clarifying.
point, to your point, this is a luck rankings game for the Bengals being the unlucky team under the current and the old expected score model. So definitely the Bengals, the unlucky team here. I will say though, you mentioned they went from 6.5 to 4.5. It probably, if you went and looked after week 1 or week 2 before Andy Dalton came in, it probably went to 7.5, maybe, So some of this, it was early poor play from Panthers and Bryce Young, but then you add in the boost to Andy Dalton, who, I mean, he has a adjusted net yards per attempt of I think it's like over 7.5 yards for as a Carolina Panther, and Bryce Young was at 3.4 as a Carolina Panther. So 4 yards per play better, per passing play better for Andy Dalton than Bryce Young during their time as Panthers. Now, obviously small sample size on Dalton there, but his career floor has been 1.5 yards better than Bryce Young in his, like I said, in his worst season. So the Panthers team, this Panthers team is much improved with Andy Dalton. This, as Brandon said, this is Andy Dalton's team until they're either eliminated from the playoffs or something like that.
Their over-under was 3.5 1 week ago. So if we get Andy Dalton the rest of the way, that is looking like it was a little bit maybe free money-ish territory going forward. Yep. We already got the 1, so we need 3 more to get there.
It's back to 5.5, by the way.
Yes.
Short money for
3.5 was a terrible line.
Short money on short plus money on the over, minus 130, under 5.5. Andy Dalton against his former team at home.
Ooh,
on Sunday.
Andy Dalton's
that's not math. That's narrative crap, Nick Giffen.
Yep.
So that actually transitions well to our next one. If Carolina, Nick, isn't the worst team in the NFL, because this is with Dalton in mind, you think they're much better. So your tone to me indicates that there are a few other possibilities as worst teams in the league.
Yes, and I know the listeners can't see this, but in our outline, I have week 2 NFL tiers and week 3 NFL tiers as posted by Ben Baldwin on Twitter. You should definitely follow him. He's fantastic with what he posts, his weekly recaps. But the Panthers went from all the way down in the bottom left of the graph, meaning completely terrible, to joining the other bottom tier teams in just 1 week because of Andy Dalton. So that's still incorporating weeks 1 and 2 data. So they're definitely not the worst team in the NFL with Andy Dalton. To me, it's tough. We don't know. Is it, Miami without Tua? If Tua returns, they're not the worst team in the NFL, but without him, maybe. New England is still really bad. That, to me, I think that's my answer, even though they beat the Bengals in week 1. The Bengals, man, they're so good on offense, but they're so bad on defense. So, Jacoby Brissett just found a way to just manage that game. And, Cincinnati had their apparently typical slow start and New England covered there and won. But I still think it's the Patriots. They don't have an offensive line. Jacoby Brissett, has looked like he's been injured multiple times this year and still ended up playing. They played so bad against the Jets on Thursday night that they finally put in Drake May at the end of the game there because they were getting beat so bad. So I think it's the New England Patriots.
Brandon, who do you think is the worst team in the league? Is it Carolina?
Yeah, it's not Carolina right now. I had New England as one of my possibilities. That win over the Bengals that got us all excited, a little less exciting now that we've seen the rest of the Bengals so far. I think the Raiders, who we just talked about, the fact that they beat the Ravens is going to look stupider and stupider the longer the season goes on. Like, that is going to just be baffling the rest of the year. I think still the Giants, too. That was the hot read pick Thursday night. They play the Cowboys. This is the Dallas get right spot for me. I don't think Dallas is great, but I think the Giants are not. So I think Raiders, Giants, Patriots, of course, Dolphins right now with Skylar Thompson or whoever they're rolling out there. Plenty of bad teams to pick from.
Okay, we'll do one more before we go. Real quick. NFL underdogs of 6+ points are now 12-1 against the number through 3 weeks, improving the best start for big dogs in recorded NFL betting history. Pick your favorite 6+ point dog this week. Brandon, I'll let you chime in first because when we did the recap pod on Sunday, you gave out the teaser in regards to the Chiefs and Chargers line. Still there at 8.5. That's one of the games. So Chargers getting 8.5 at home, host home, as you put it.
Yeah.
New England at San Francisco in a feels like a get right spot for San Fran. I mean, as a Patriots fan, I kind of wish the Niners won that game. Maybe they a little more complacent. I don't know if that's the case, but they're banged up. We know that. Offensive line, weapons, all of it. And then Denver against the Jets. Brandon, I'll let you go first. Favorite of those three.
Yeah, and I played the Jets as part of that teaser. I got the Jets
That's right.
Chiefs just win baby teaser. So I guess to that point, I would really only be teasing these teams if I did not want the full spread. So I guess I don't necessarily want to bet them as over touchdown favorites. I'm gonna pass on all three of these teams, but I do have an answer for you, Brendan. There's a fourth choice here as of last night, and I think Jacksonville plus 6.5 at the Texans is a great play. And it's actually one of my favorite early plays of the week. So Jacksonville, of course, looked absolutely horrendous last night. Jacksonville's new defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, plays the most man coverage in the NFL. Josh Allen is elite against man coverage since 2020 for Warren Sharp. Early downs, 42 touchdowns, 4 interceptions against man coverage, 27 touchdowns, 29 interceptions against zone. Okay, well, now you got to play C.J. Stroud. How's he do? Hey, guess what? C.J. Stroud against zone, which the Jaguars don't play very much. C.J. Stroud lights it up. Number 1 QBR last year, 89th percentile PFF against zone. How about against man? The thing Jacksonville does do, 27th in QBR a year ago, 17th percentile against a man in PFF. So it's a matchups play here. It's also just a big line for an early season division game. I don't really trust the Texans still. I know we were on the island last year, but I think this is going to come down to the quarterbacks in a game where neither team can really run the football right now. And there's a lot of trends already on Jacksonville here. Winless teams against non-undefeated winning teams, 62% against the spread from week 4 forward. Road teams, after failing to cover by 24 or more, 62% against the spread. And then, Brendan, we've talked about this all year. 6.5 point road underdogs, just blind. That is a spot to play teams. Those teams are 7-1 ATS for the season. Play the money line also. We're getting over a 30% ROI on the money line. I like Jacksonville here. I think I will be looking at Jacksonville to win outright as well. And I don't think it's going to stay at 6.5 all week long. So I might log this one early in the action app.
Jacksonville minus 5.5. Any takers there?
I mean, I want the 6.5 because we're getting the key numbers. So we'll see where it ends up later. But it's still those numbers on the board. So I don't need to worry about the 5.5 just yet.
No, I was saying minus 5.5. Like playing it the other way. Doing the Brandon special.
All right. I like where your head is at. Let's go. Let's do the Giants Broncos. Let's go right back there. Jacksonville minus 5.5. I like it.
Sorry. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. Good call.
Nick, what say you?
I was going to say the same thing, actually. The hidden fourth option. Jacksonville is also a luck rankings play this week. So in weeks 3 and 4, now, obviously, week 3 was a disaster for the luck rankings. 2 and 5 for unlucky teams that meet our thresholds. But that happens, right? When you're hitting at 67% or 65%, you're still going to have 2 and 5 weeks. And the luck rankings in weeks 3 and 4 traditionally have been at their highest, 68, 69% for the luck rankings in the history in weeks 3 and 4. So I'm still going to trust the process, and I'm going to take the Jacksonville Jaguars as the unlucky team here on the road. And we have a little bit more trends on the road teams as well with the luck rankings. And so, yeah, right there with Brandon. Love this spot. Love the zone and man splits there that he mentioned. And I think that was one of my failings in the handicap of Jacksonville versus Buffalo, was not considering the Josh Allen just absolutely destroying man coverage spot. So, always good to be humbled by that and learn from it. But to apply those learnings, I agree. Similar for CJ Stroud, he's much better versus zone than man, and Jacksonville plays the highest amount of man coverage in the league. I'm with Brandon. Take the 6.5 now. Take the money line. But also, the Denver Broncos are an unlucky team in the luck rankings as well. I do have to point that out. So maybe to Brandon's point where he was teasing the Jets, don't feel too comfortable with the spread. There are some signal on Denver covering versus the Jets as well. Because think about this. I know Denver just won 26-7 against Tampa Bay. But when you win by that much, it's not because you got lucky. It's because you were better, right? So Denver is still the third most unlucky team in the luck rankings, even though they blew out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because in weeks 1 and 2, they were very unlucky. And week 3, they won because they should have, right? So they overall stay unlucky on the season as a whole. And so they're still the unlucky team here versus the Jets by our luck rankings.
And this ends the episode very well because you led off the show about improved quarterback play. And that Bo Nix, Sean Payton having a few weeks to get it right. Nix only has 1 touchdown pass, I think, and he's ran 1 in, or ran 2 in. But it's better. But man, good notes there by both of you about Stroud.
And that was a key point of taking the Broncos to cover versus Tampa Bay was Bo Nix improved from week 1 to week 2. If he can maintain that week 2 level or improve even more into week 3, the Broncos were going to cover versus Tampa Bay, and they did. So hopefully we see more continued good play from Bo Nix. There will be ups and downs, but I think that week 2 and week 3 level from him will make the Broncos a competent team.
Yeah, good note there also on the Jacksonville defense. As far as their man coverage, Joe Brady cooked them up last night, Monday night. Wow. 9-1. Joe Brady 9-1 now, or Josh Allen 9-1 with Joe Brady as his offensive coordinator. All right, gents, that's it. Nick Giffen, thank you very much for stopping by. I'm sure we'll get you on again at some point, but find Nick Giffen in the Action Network app. Find him actionnetwork.com. I'll lead college basketball. That's what he also does here because I forgot the first time. The Action Discord server, NASCAR, NFL luck rankings. Brandon Anderson, he's back with you first thing Friday morning for NFL Week 4 Best Bets. Don't want to miss that. Brandon coming off a nice week. And then we have the recap episode coming your way first thing Monday morning. Also the Sunday 6-pack with Raybon and Stuckey. A lot of stuff. Thanks for being with us for NFL Roundtable Week 4. Brendan Glasheen signing off here on the Action Network podcast.